Berlin Marathon 2024, attempt number 7. Come on, Berlin, be good to me, baby. Let's go. Hi guys, I'm Nick Bester. I'm a 220 marathoner, an online running coach, and I'm about to embrace a 10-week marathon block in order to break 220 at this year's Berlin Marathon. And in today's video, I'm going to explain why I haven't broken 220 just yet, what is counting against me in this upcoming block, and then what is counting for me and how we're going to get it this time. But before I explain all of that, let me just give you a recap on my previous 6 sub 220 marathon attempts.
Looking strong, Nick. So close, buddy.
Okay, so I've been able to manage 2:21:27 over my last 5 marathon attempts and got within 9 seconds, but I haven't dipped under just yet. And do you know what? Coming from a 3-hour 17-minute background, having shot for sub 220, it was beyond my wildest dreams, but getting so close, it feels like my running journey won't quite be complete without dipping under just one time. Okay, now let me share with you why I don't think I've broken sub 220 just yet. So I know I'm definitely capable of it. I think if you look at my half marathon time at 66 minutes and 19, that definitely indicates that there's sub 220 within that. And the fact that when I ran 220 and 8 seconds, I didn't actually feel like I was near the peak shape, and I've been in much better shapes leading into these races. So I 100% know I've got it within me. But why I haven't, honestly, is just because I haven't executed the perfect race yet. I don't want to make any excuses. I think in a few of these attempts, I've got into sub 220 shape, and a few of them, perhaps like the last 2, I haven't quite been in sub 220 shape. Even if I did execute the perfect race on those days, I probably would have fallen short. But you know what? I think when it comes to marathon training and specifically marathon race day, there's so many variables you got to consider. There's like 1,000 variables, and I feel like on race day, for me to succeed in this challenge, probably around 995 of those 1,000 variables have to click. I think in a lot of the races and a lot of my previous attempts, I've been very consistent, which I'm super proud of, but I feel like there's a few variables that just haven't clicked, and I just haven't had that X factor, that killer instinct on race day that hopefully I'm going to feel this time around. But yeah, like I said, no excuses. I think I'm going to do what I can to get into shape this time, and I just haven't executed it to the absolute best of my abilities in these previous attempts of mine. Okay, so let's start with the not so good news before we go into the good news. So what's counting against me this block? What's going to be holding me back? So I think there's 3 main things you have to touch base on. The first of which is that I've got 2 little kids. So for me, family will always come first. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And if I think of when I ran 2:20:08, I had 1 child, and balancing 1 child between 2 parents was a whole lot easier. 2 is a whole lot tougher. Someone joked and they said 1 child feels like 1, 2 feels like 7. And I think once the second one came across, I could definitely relate to that joke. So you know what, it's been very difficult finding the balance, and as we know, sleep is crucial, especially when the margins are so tight. You need to be getting those 8.5 hours sleep within a marathon block, good consistent deep sleep, and thankfully the little ones have been sleeping well recently, but let's hope that over the course of the next 10 weeks that remains the case. The second thing is that I'm not getting younger, guys. So I'm 34 at the moment, which is still relatively young in marathon terms, let's say. But I've been running for 11 years, and I think, there's a thing called the running age, and I feel like my peak is probably at the moment, probably about between 2 years ago and within the next 2 years. So that's my window of when I'm going to absolutely perform the best at the marathon distance. So I really need to make this count. But even if I think back to, if I put in the same amount of work that I'm putting in now 2 years ago, I feel like my pace relative to work, it just came a little bit easier 2 years ago. So I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to work smarter. I'm not getting younger. I'm obviously not old and haven't gone over my peak just yet, but I do feel like it came a bit easier in the previous years. And then the third thing is that if I look at my best performances, I absolutely thrive in the cold weather. Like there's something about very, very icy cold weather and me that just gets along well. Perhaps it's because I'm slightly bigger than the people I compete against, or I don't know what the case is, but whenever it's sort of like between 5 degrees and even minus degrees is when I perform my best. Obviously, Berlin Marathon is not like this. In the past, it's been warmer. Let's hope for a cool day. If it's anything to go about in the British summer we're having at the moment, then it's going to be a cool day. If the conditions are warm, then obviously chances will get a little bit smaller. But let's be positive. It's going to be a cool day and we're going to fly. Okay, so now let's touch base on some of the variables that are counting for me this training block. So the first of which is a big one. I've recently moved to Winchester. So I lived in London for 7.5 years, and it's my first marathon build being based in Winchester. And let me tell you something, there's a lot more hills here. So naturally, I'm going to do a lot more hilly training. I'm going to climb a lot more than in the past. I'm going to get that elevation in. And if I think about leg speed in the previous attempts, it's been there, but I've probably lacked that killer power at the end. So hopefully that's going to make a difference. I'll be getting a lot more elevation on the terrain here. Once again, if you live in like a hilly area, it's very good. Hills do pay the bills. I'm sure you've heard that before. And even if you're training for flatter races, hills are super important. But you must try and replicate some of your longer runs as what the race day gradient is going to be. Obviously, Berlin Marathon is relatively flat. So whilst I'm going to get the hills in training here, I'm also going to look for some flatter, faster routes so I can get that leg speed. Otherwise, 3:18, 3:19 a K on race day sort of doesn't become realistic. The second thing to mention is that in Winchester, I've got a really good routine going in my running cave over here. I think when I was in London, and you know, I was very happy in London, love London, and love still going through to London every week, but I ended up doing too much. I was seeing too many strength and conditioning coaches, physios, meeting, you know, London, there's so many events, meeting, and eventually what I found that with all these extra bits plus work, there wasn't that much time to train, and I was overextending myself. So here I feel like I'm really finding a nice groove, a nice routine, and hopefully that's going to make the difference. The next thing to mention is that I'm really going to focus a lot of time and attention to my training this block. In the past, I think I really haven't given enough to the training, and this time I'm really going to prioritize as much time to training as possible. This block, for the first time, I'm doing a 10-week training block. So in the past, I've done 8-week blocks for all of my marathon attempts. In the more recent one, my Manchester one, I did a 6-week block, so it was really a proper crash course. But this is the first time I'm actually doing a 10-week training block, so 2 weeks longer than normal, and you know, that could make the difference. We shall see. I spoke about previously getting a coach, and even coaches need coaches, and I have previously spoken to 1 or 2 people. It's still not completely off the cards. But at the moment, I don't have a coach. But what I'm doing this one is that I'm planning out my 10 weeks of training. So in the past, I've had an idea of what I'm doing on a Tuesday, Thursday, my weekend session, and everything else easy in between. Now I've actually structurally written it. And what I've done in the past, where I've made the mistake slightly, is that you want to progressively increase week on week. Okay, with maybe a down week here and there. I'm racing the big half, which is a half marathon 4 weeks out, so I might have a slightly lower week that week. But in the past, I don't think I've necessarily built week on week. It's sort of been like slightly higher, slightly lower, and it's been good solid training. But I think when the margins are so tight, planning for this will be a whole lot better. And then the other 2 things to mention, one is that I've been issued an elite entry once again, so I'll have drinks en route, which is a huge help. Thank you so much, Berlin Marathon. Thanks to the person who organized it. And yeah, that's going to be a massive help. And that just gives me motivation to like take the opportunity and literally run and make it count. And then the last thing to mention is that the shoes I'll be running in is one of 2. So it's either going to be the Pro Evos, which I tested and absolutely love, or it's going to be the new Pro 4s. If Adidas want me to run in those. I think they're going to be released to the general public probably around about December. Obviously, Berlin Marathon is September time, but they do want some of their elites and sub-elites to hero and showcase the shoe. So I'm more than happy to hopefully do that, and that's, you know, so much added motivation in that by itself. Okay, so I've mentioned what's counting for me, what's counting against me, and how we're going to do it this time. Along the way, I'm definitely going to give you updates on how the training's going. I'm going to definitely look to film some key sessions, tell you why I do things in a certain way. I'll try and make it as informative as possible to help as many of you as possible. Hopefully you can learn little bits and pieces. And yeah, you know what? Like I say, these sub 220 attempts, they're no joke. It's not like studying for a test and coming just short and then studying again. It's like putting your body through 8 to 10 weeks of absolutely pushing your limits week in, week out. And in the past, it's probably been one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I have no doubt this build is going to be the toughest thing I have ever done. And I don't know why we do these things to ourselves, but we do. But I'm actually super excited for this one. I'm mentally rejuvenated. I'm in such a good place. But you know what? Marathons are never fairy tales, as we know. All we can do is give ourselves the best shots, and I can promise you that I'm going to put absolutely everything I can into this. Guys, if you see me slacking in any of my training or on Strava, please hold me accountable, and together we're going to get there, onwards and upwards. No one's going to get it but us, so let's go out there, do our thing, and go get it. Let's go.